So in Termination Shock, we have a kind of maverick billionaire. In terms of your best, I won't say optimistic, but should we say possibilistic ideas, what would you see as being a way that this climate change would start to be dealt with?
Well, again, the thing that makes me feel optimistic just within the last, since the book got published, really, is that I'm seeing a lot of smart people turning their attention to carbon capture as an engineering project that that's deserving of massive resources, and that is, that's the name of the game for the next 100 years. Is we need to sort of put as much as we can into processes of whatever type that will extract excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And it may just be anecdotal on my part. I don't have any figures to back this up, but just it appears to me that suddenly a lot of nerds are getting really interested in carbon capture. The geoengineering thing, so what's called solar radiation management is or solar geoengineering. So bouncing back part of the sun's radiation is, it's kind of the equivalent of applying a tourniquet to your severed arm so that you can get to the hospital. It's a terrible thing that you do in a really bad situation, and not to be confused with a real solution. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. I think there's a lot of opposition to it, and the people who oppose research or development of these things have a lot of levers and knobs that they can turn on the control panel of modern society to slow things down and prevent work from happening.
So again, before we started actually this conversation on air, we were talking a little bit about social media, and I think reading books like Merchants of Doubt, which I don't know if you've read that book, which is basically, it looks at how the tobacco industry managed to fight against the idea that cigarettes would be a cause of cancer, and then how similar methods have been used also by fossil fuel companies as well. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the things? Do we need to somehow radically rethink our relationship with the way that media can pour out? I mean, because once an idea has gone out there, it's going to take, as we know, the old thing, which is it's much easier to fool someone than to persuade them that they've been fooled. And once an idea has gone out there, once it's stuck in there, it requires a lot of work to shift that. And I think I've seen a lot in terms of on social media of very rapid reactions that are kind of refuting the ideas of so many scientists in climate change. And then you have to deal with people one by one, to try and persuade them and to try and offer them the more accurate information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess my kind of meta observation about all this is that there are very few people in the world who believe in scientific truth just out of pure, noble, rarefied motives, and people are more apt to pay attention to these things if there's something in it for them. So if you look at the scientific revolution 300 years ago, there were a few sort of pure seekers of truth who were kind of leading the way, but it rapidly became clear that there was money to be made from steam engines or from annuities in the Bank of England, or various other practical applications of the scientific method, and so So as soon as that became clear, then all sorts of people jumped on the bandwagon because they could see how it was going to help them. Right now, on social media, so what passes for debate in social media, there's very few consequences, good or bad, for most people. I mean, you can do shit posting about or trolling about whatever you want. It doesn't really affect your personal reputation. It's just a way of scoring points or amusing oneself on the internet. It's generally more amusing to sow trouble and to get people riled up and to score cheap points on your rhetorical adversaries than it is to familiarize yourself with the facts, with the reality. So until that can be changed, I don't think any amount of preaching or finger shaking, is going to change the way people behave on the internet.
I mean, during your process of writing the book, and then also since it's been published, I would imagine, have you had more interaction with people who've just said, well, Neal, I don't really believe this, and have you seen this kind of the hockey stick thing actually? And I wondered if you found yourself, or indeed found any methods that have been more useful, or which have properly opened up a conversation as opposed to kept it as a kind of an argument of just two sides.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how little of I've heard from denialists. I think and that may just be self-selection, that they're not going to read the book, but there's I think there is a tendency for people to sort of deny it, or I think there's a fair amount of, I'm going to call it bad faith denial that happens, where someone who really thinks climate change is real claims that they don't think it's real because they're staking out a political position, or they don't want to lose an argument, and some of that, I think, stems from a feeling of hopelessness, that the scope of the problem seems so enormous, and it seems so difficult to come to grips with, that people would just rather kind of put their heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening than they kind of expose themselves to the difficult process of thinking it through and trying to imagine what can I do as one individual about this problem. So I think something that can change the conversation is if one can point to practical things that we can do is to attack the problem in a serious way, and again, the answer is carbon capture, but a temporary stopgap answer might be solar geoengineering.
I wondered, and I've seen you talk about this in the past as well, about now it seems science, the political battle lines are getting clearer and clearer, and it's not as if the left are for science and the right are against science. It depends on the science. We see that, for instance, it's more likely in terms of genetic modification that you will get a large number of people on the left who will be highly critical of the science there, and then on the right we will see that within climate change. But it does seem to me that maybe it's just my own naivety, maybe it's a lack of research, but in terms of science, where the battle lines are drawn so much based on your own political biases, it's become a lot more central to the arguments. And I think, during the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, I remember, an enormous number of books coming out saying suddenly now it seems scientific denialism is becoming a big problem in the US.
Yeah. Again, I think there was through most of the 20th century, there was a big upside to science that was obvious to everyone. So you had the polio vaccine. You had, the ability to fly around on airplanes, and even simple things like washing machines, blenders, antibiotics. There were all of these technological innovations that made very clear, practical changes for the better in people's lives, their life expectancies. And now that seems to have slowed down. I mean, we see improvements, video games have gotten a lot better looking. The internet runs faster. You don't need a modem anymore, that kind of thing. But it no longer seems to be improving life for most people on the same pace and scale as what we saw 100 years ago. So that, I think, makes it a lot easier for people to kind of just pull back and look at all scientific authority and expertise with a jaundiced eye. And as you say, it then starts to boil down to, okay, how does this kind of interact with my political orientation? I'm going to judge this science, based on whether it's good or bad for who I am politically, and so you end up with a lot of kind of bad faith argumentation and so point scoring on the internet.
I wonder how much it's also down to the fact that news has become such a big entertainment industry, because you need a desk and a reasonable quality camera, and we have, in the US and the UK and in many places, around the world now, there's 24-hour news, there's loads of news programs, there's panels which are filled with people, none of whom are normally experts, but all of whom are brilliant at having opinions. That's what they do. They have opinions for all those different newspapers, and I wonder how much that has also hastened the pace where these things become about identity and become about the culture wars.
We don't, in the States, we had Walter Cronkite, and some competitors on the other major networks, but there were only 3 major networks, and they all shared in a certain kind of consensus about the story that they were going to tell, and seemed to have the confidence of a pretty large chunk of the electorate. And so now, as you say, anybody who sits in front of a desk with a microphone and a camera is, in a way, kind of arrogating to themselves the authority of a Walter Cronkite. And we tend to believe them and accept them as credible, even though they're just some random person and there's not the whole kind of editorial infrastructure in place, causing them to state views that are in line with the mainstream political consensus. So yeah, it's a fragmented kind of news environment right now, and as is well known, people just pick and choose the news that they want to believe in.
It makes that book by Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. It now looks like quite a jolly, optimistic book, really. That one, which is, and it's one of my favorite books actually. I think that was it was not far off 1984, was it, that it came out, because it was about, are we in an Orwellian future or a kind of Huxley future?
Yeah, and the Huxley one being more superficially benign. So I don't know what to tell you, but I think I keep hearing people claim that there's a whole lot of dissatisfied, middle of the road people who don't feel that the left or the right represents them at all, and are sort of bewildered by the fact that middle of the road voices don't seem to get a hearing.
How do you feel about your responsibility as an author when you are dealing with big subjects, but you're also, as you say, you are a storyteller? That's, you know, the entertainment is a very important part of it. Do you feel that hand on your shoulder, though, in terms of the responsibility of dealing with these issues?
I try not to. I don't think it's productive of good fiction. I think I'm sort of a hardcore believer in artistic license, artistic freedom, and I think that there's always the people who are of a political mindset, be it left or right, are always looking for some way to bring art under their control. They just can't help themselves. It just disturbs them to see people making art, so there's always various efforts underway to suborn art and artists and turn them into a propaganda wing, basically, for one party or another. And you know, the different political orientations have different ways of doing that. From rightists, it might just be straight up, you know, censorship and, you know, forced adherence to a certain code of conduct. And on the left, it tends to be more sort of, I think, kind of insidious, sort of guilt tripping and basically coming up with ideological explanations of why, you know, it begins by saying that all art is ultimately political anyway, and then once you've swallowed that, then you've already lost, because if you agree to the proposition that all art is political, then why shouldn't you write political? You know, why shouldn't you turn all of your artistic output into overtly political propaganda? So I'm a pretty strong believer in rejecting that hand on my shoulder, because I think it's always someone with bad intentions who's trying to bring art and artists under their control.
And just